response from the White House was, "Don't jump to conclusions. This may just be a criminal act." It's like, what in the world are you thinking? I mean, cannot read what's being said, what this person has said. There is a movement of radical jihadism. It's not, by the way, a single monolithic movement with one person in charge telling everybody what to do. It has very different characteristics in different parts of the world with local objectives. In some cases, it's relating to securing Kashmir for Pakistan. In others, it may be to spread jihadism through universities in the western parts of the world. In others, it may be to place suicide bombers. In others, it's to send rockets into Israel. But regardless of the individual differences between Shia and Sunni style jihadism, the overall objectives are either the same or very, very similar. And they are to cause the collapse of the West, the eradication and elimination of Israel as an independent state, and ultimately to have a caliphate or hidden imam rule the world. And how in the world we're supposed to combat that reality if we can't even use the appropriate lexicon to describe it is beyond me. Our last president spoke about a war on terror. This president doesn't want to use that term. Well, let's use some term to make it very, very clear that there is a threat to humanity, a threat to civilization, which is being poised by these radical violent jihadists, and we will confront it and deal with it every way we know how around the world.
You write in the book, even after the attacks of September 11, some Americans cannot bring themselves to recognize the scope and reality of the jihadist threat. We're actually some ways away now from 9/11, but I was really struck by the phenomenon during the last presidential campaign that you and most of the other Republican candidates put this issue front and center when you went to your website, your campaign website, or McCain or Giuliani. Right front and center was the issue of the global jihad. When you went to Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton or the other leading Democrats, you had to search and search and search to be able to find any reference to it at all. I think of it sometimes, I'm obviously not the only one, as a division between September 10 people and September 11 people. But I confess that I'm perplexed as to what it is that causes people to see the world in such dramatically different ways coming out of an event that was so traumatic for all of us.
I must admit that I am in the same boat you are.
So when you're
I just don't understand how there can be leadership. I understand how the public at large or groups within the public at large may tend to forget the reality of threats of this nature. It's not written about every day. And if it's not written about, sometimes we lose the currency of the extent of that threat. And yet, if you pick up the papers over the last few years and read about the attacks in country after country after country by jihadists of various types, you recognize this is still a very active effort. There's a commission, the follow-on commission of the 9/11 Commission, the Commission on Nuclear Proliferation and Terrorism, I believe is the name of the commission. The conclusion of that commission was that, in their view, within the next 5 years, there will be an attack, a terrorist attack on a major Western city, of a weapon of mass destruction. Now, this is a very severe and serious group that looks at the threats that we face. This is a very significant and real threat, and must be a major focus of the President of the United States. I presume he's trying to curry favor, and I know that, or he doesn't want to offend. And somehow it's more important to tell the truth than it is to worry about being offensive.
I'm prepared to say, or let's assume for the sake of argument, that there's nothing but goodwill and honest intention. It certainly didn't begin with President Obama. It didn't begin in 2008. John Kerry, when he was the Democratic nominee in 2004, gave an interview to the New York Times in which he described jihadist terrorism. His term was that we have to see it as a nuisance. That was his word, a nuisance, like gambling and prostitution.
No,
that's
you're
what
kidding.
You're
kidding.
He said you could never eliminate it, but you could reduce it. That we need to get back to looking at terrorism in that light. Now, I'm not prepared to say he knows better and he's saying that deliberately misleading his audience. I assume that remark is made sincerely and in goodwill. And that when people say, you conservatives, you right-wingers, you anti-jihadists, you make too much of this notion of jihad. It's crazy to think that a ragtag band of Islamic extremist terrorists are going to be able to bring down the United States or anything close to it. That they mean it. And my question is, what accounts for the divide, and B, how does somebody like you from one side of that divide reach people who are on the other side?
With difficulty. The truth of the matter is, and we had the same battle about communism. I remember having a series of arguments about how severe was the threat of the Soviet Union and communism. And we had this issue about whether America should continue to grow. I remember people saying that Reagan was absolutely nuts to be spending all this money on defense and to be talking about Star Wars. Wasn't Star Wars ridiculous? And there were others who said, no, this is very important to do. We can outcompete the communists. We can outcompete the Soviet Union. Ronald Reagan was proven right. The others were proven wrong. And those who think that jihadism is just a nuisance, boy, wouldn't that be wonderful if that were the case? Wouldn't that be nice if it did not represent a clear and present danger to the world? But unfortunately, just read the papers. In the last several weeks, we've had scores of people around the world being killed by one form or another of jihadists. And they will certainly target this country. They say they will target this country. And I happen to take them at their word. I hate to go back to the greatest monster of the last century, but Hitler said what he would do. And a lot of people said, oh, he's just saying that for political reasons. Well, he wasn't just saying it. He actually did it. And when people say awful, terrible things, we ought to listen and take them at their word and make sure they cannot do the things they say they're going to do. And if they never get the capacity to do those awful things, wouldn't that be wonderful? But let's make sure that in the work we do that we're making sure they can't do those things. And we invest in the intelligence resources that are necessary to protect us. And by the way, I just want to underscore that. The best thing you can do, in my view, to protect ourselves from these radical, violent jihadists is to have very extensive intelligence capabilities. People throughout the world who are learning what's going on, gathering information, and stopping attacks before they occur. Thank heavens, for instance, that we were able to learn about those 10 doctors in England that were going to bring down 10 aircraft on their way to the United States, killing, several thousand human beings? Thank heavens the intelligence was able to identify that threat and stop it before it happened. When I helped organize the Olympic Winter Games in Salt Lake, we spent $330 million on security. Magnetometers, fences, and so forth. But you know what? I didn't have a lot of confidence in the magnetometers and fences. What I had confidence in was the intelligence work done by the FBI beforehand in the whole year leading up to the games, identifying potential threats, tracking people who represented threats, trying to expose or to break apart those threats. That is something we have to do on a far more effective basis. And the targeting of CIA interrogators or the targeting of our intelligence resources and somehow making these people who are so key to our safety and security, making them somehow the bad guy is, in my opinion, a very, very bad and misguided policy that this administration has pursued.
Let me switch gears. I want to touch quickly on a couple of other points and then open up to questions from the audience. You have very little to say in this book about religion. I don't mean the discussion about jihadism, but about religion in America. You're a religious man. You note that religion is taken very seriously by most Americans, that we're a religious nation. And yet it strikes me as strange that in somebody for whom I know religion is as important as it is for you, that in a book that's subtitled The Case for American Greatness, that there isn't something more in here about your own thoughts about the links between American religion and American greatness. So let me put it to you here tonight. Is America's religiosity an element in what makes America great, or is that simply an interesting fact about America that doesn't really touch on our greatness one way or the other?
I actually do believe that, and in my chapter called The Culture of Citizenship, I describe a number of things that give me confidence in America's capability to continue to lead the world at great length. And I'll tell you why. I used to wonder why it was some nations became highly successful and other nations right next door to them were basket cases, if you will. Why are we so powerful economically and Mexico so troubled? Chile, why is it so strong? And Argentina in such trouble? In Israel, why are the Israelis such an export-oriented and technologically advanced society, and the Palestinian territories far less able to perform in a similar way? And I've read some books on that. Guns, Germs, and Steel by Jared Diamond suggests it's all geography. And there's some truth to that. But a far more compelling book to me was a book written by a professor at Harvard here, David Landis, called The Wealth and Poverty of Nations. He looks at the coming and going of each great civilization in time. And after about 500 pages of analysis, he says roughly this: